some questions. You just talked about being in Washington and the conversations that are going on. I've noticed that there has been an increase in spending on federal lobbying, both since January, but also since you became chancellor. Could you just talk about, I assume it's a priority of yours, just kind of why that is, why the bigger investment on it under your leadership, but also now under Trump and on all the changes?
Sure. Crucial time as it relates to federal funding. So we receive about $1.55 billion in federal research funding. We're in the top 10 nationally. And there have been a lot of questions raised about the future of federal research funding. We receive over $600 million a year just from NIH. And so when that funding is threatened, we feel as though it's our responsibility to make sure we're telling the story about the great work that goes on here at Carolina. Not just groundbreaking, life-saving research, but the support of thousands of jobs here in Chapel Hill, in the Triangle, and in North Carolina. So we continue to make our case as effectively as we can with federal policymakers. We do that directly ourselves. I spend a lot of time on it personally. We also have a federal relations team that works for the university. We work through the system office. We work through trade associations like the AAU and the APLU. And then we also work with law firms and advocacy firms both in Washington and Raleigh in that regard as well. I don't think there's anything unique about Carolina in that respect. In fact, last time I was up on the Hill, it looked like an AAU meeting. There were so many university presidents and chancellors walking the halls of Congress.
Could you talk about some of the people you have lobbying for you? It includes Richard Burr, Chess McDowell, Chris Lasfita. I think people can draw their conclusions about why they might be the most effective people to do it right now, but just what your view of that is, how you decide who you want lobbying for the university.
We have a range of folks lobbying for us, both law firms and advocacy firms, and some of them are long-term retainers, and some of them are hired on a more short-term basis. We're right in the middle, obviously, of federal budget season. The House just delivered their budget early this morning, so this is one of the most intense times you'd expect to see a rise in our spending on advocacy efforts during a period like this.
Yes, I have a couple more questions about your federal lobby. So I was wondering which specific lawmakers you were meeting with, any congressional committees, and then I was also wondering if there's any legislation in the process of being proposed.
We spend a lot of time with the North Carolina delegation, as you expect, and have been tremendously supportive. We don't need to convince them of how important research is to Carolina and how important Carolina is to the health of the state. I've said many times that I'm pretty confident that this is the most important institution in building a better future for North Carolinians and has been consistently since 1793. But we also speak with the chairs of the committees and the staffs of the relevant committees. So the committees that govern higher education and federal research, as well as both House and Senate leadership. As far as legislation goes, the primary legislation is the budget itself. And the House budget was delivered this morning. There'll be a reconciliation process with the Senate budget. Your guess is as good as mine on how long that's going to take, but we'll continue to stay engaged with policymakers in that regard.
Thank you. And I was also wondering, I've noticed from the lobbying reports that there seems to be a really big emphasis on advocating for health sciences research funding. And as you know, there have been cuts to a lot of different programs like social sciences, humanities, information sciences. I was wondering if there's any work going on behind the scenes to advocate for funding in those areas as well.
We're always advocating for Carolina and for more funding for our priorities. Health sciences is particularly important to us here at Carolina. I mentioned the $600 million. It's more than that, a little over $600 million in NIH funding specifically, and that's been a particular target. And so we do spend a lot of time and focus on that and other health sciences funding. But more broadly, we're always advocating for Carolina and for our funding profile, not just at the federal level, but at the state level. We're extraordinarily fortunate here in North Carolina to have so much support from the state and its taxpayers, broad bipartisan consensus going back decades, over $600 million in state appropriation, and we continue to engage with policymakers in Raleigh as well.